The casserole dish was still warm in my hands when my son-in-law dropped it in the trash. He didn't even set it down first. He tipped it slow and easy right into the kitchen garbage on top of the coffee grounds, and the green beans I'd cooked slid out in one wet clump while my daughter laughed and said the smell was giving her a headache. They'd ordered burgers. The bag was already on the counter, grease coming through the paper, and my grandson was peeling the wrapper off one before the trash lid even closed. "No offense, Grandma," my granddaughter said, not looking up from her phone. "It's just kind of an old people food." I stood there holding nothing because the dish was gone now, sitting in the garbage with 30 years of my marriage cooked into it. That was Gordon's mother's recipe. I'd made it for every Sunday supper since 1989. My hands were shaking, and I told myself it was just the cold water I'd had them under at the sink. But I knew better. I'd known better for a long time. Nobody apologized. Nobody ever did anymore. My son-in-law wiped his hands on the dish towel, the one with the rooster on it, the one I'd brought from my own kitchen, and went back to the living room to watch a show. My daughter followed him. The kids drifted off with their burgers, and I was alone again in the kitchen of a house they all thought belonged to them. It didn't. I want to be clear about that part because it matters, and because for a long time I let everyone be confused about it on purpose, including myself. This house, the white 2-story on Linden Street with the wraparound porch and the maple Gordon planted the year our daughter was born. This house was mine. Gordon and I bought it in 1981 and burned the mortgage papers in the backyard fire pit in 1998, the two of us drinking cheap champagne out of jelly jars because we couldn't believe we'd done it. We owned it free and clear. When Gordon passed 5 years ago, it came to me, every nail and shingle of it, and the deed had my name on it and nobody else's. I never told them that, not in so many words. 4 years back, when my daughter and her husband lost the place they'd been renting, he'd had his hours cut. She was between jobs. The kids needed a guard. I said, "Come stay with me, just till you get on your feet." I had all this room rattling around me since Gordon died, and I thought, foolishly, that filling it with family would feel like life again. I gave them the big bedroom upstairs, the one Gordon and I had shared. I took the small room at the end of the hall, the one we used to call the sewing room. I told myself it was temporary. 4 years is a long temporary. Somewhere in those 4 years, the house stopped feeling like mine. It happened so slow, I couldn't point to the day. First it was little things. They rearranged the furniture, took down Gordon's hunting prints, and put up a television the size of a barn door. Then it was my chair, the recliner that had been Gordon's, given to my grandson because it was the only one that reclined far enough for his gaming. Then it was the dinner table. They started ordering out most nights, and when they did cook, they didn't think to make a plate for me. I'd come down and find the kitchen already cleaned, the takeout boxes in the fridge with their names written on them in marker, like I might steal a man's leftover lo mein. I started eating in my room, crackers mostly, a can of soup heated in the microwave at the hour they'd all settled in front of the TV. I told myself I wasn't hungry. I told myself old women don't need much. That's the part I'm ashamed of, if I'm honest. Not what they did, what I let them do, because I was their mother and their grandmother, and I kept thinking that if I just stayed quiet, if I just made myself small enough and useful enough, they'd remember to love me again. I kept cooking those Sunday suppers even after they'd stopped eating them, setting the dish in the middle of the table like an offering at a church that had stopped believing in me. I told myself it was love. Some of it was. But some of it was fear, plain and simple. The fear of being a burden. The fear of being alone at 68 with my husband 5 years in the ground and a daughter who looked at me like I was a piece of furniture she couldn't figure out how to get rid of. That night, after they threw out the casserole, I went up to my little room and I sat on the edge of the bed and I looked at the photograph of Gordon I keep tucked into the corner of the mirror. It's from our anniversary, our 40th, taken at the Olive Garden because that's where I wanted to go, and he'd have taken me to the moon if I'd asked. He's laughing in it. He had a good laugh, my husband, big and warm, the kind that made strangers turn around and smile. You wouldn't have stood for this, I told him, and he wouldn't have. Gordon would have had them out on the curb the first time somebody raised a voice to me. He had a long fuse and a hard stop, my husband. And family or no family, he didn't suffer cruelty. The trouble was, all I had left was the fuse. The hard stop went into the ground with him. But that night, something in me went quiet in a way it hadn't in years. Not sad quiet. Different. The quiet you get when you finally stopped arguing with yourself. I reached into the bottom drawer of my nightstand, underneath the church bulletins and the spare reading glasses, and I pulled out a manila envelope I hadn't opened in a long time. The deed was in there. So was the title to my car, the Buick that still ran like a top, because Gordon taught me to change the oil myself. My will was in there too. The one I'd had drawn up after the funeral and never updated, the one that left everything, to my daughter. I sat with that envelope in my lap for a long while. Outside my window, the porch light was flickering. It had been flickering for 2 months. My son-in-law kept saying he'd get to it. He never did. He never got to anything that didn't directly serve him, and I'd somehow gotten old enough to stop expecting otherwise. I didn't sleep that night, but it wasn't a bad not sleeping. It was the kind a person does the night before a long trip, when the bags are packed and there's nothing left but to wait for morning. In the morning, I got up before any of them, and I got dressed properly for the first time in months. Not the house coat I'd been living in. I put on the good slacks, the navy blouse, the little gold cross Gordon gave me for her 25th. I did my hair, what's left of it, twisted it up, and pinned it the way my own mother taught me. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, and I thought, there you are. I'd forgotten my own face under all that giving up. I made coffee, quiet as I could, and I drank it standing at the window, watching the sky go pink over the Hendersons' roof next door. Then I got my pocketbook and the manila envelope and my car keys, and I left a note on the refrigerator under the magnet shaped like Ohio. Out running errands, it said, "Don't hold supper for me," as if they ever did. It was a Tuesday. The county seat is about 25 minutes from Linden Street, and I drove it slow, the way you drive when you've got nowhere to be but somewhere to go. I passed the Methodist church where I taught Sunday school for 20 years, past the Kroger where the checkout girls used to know me by name before they all got replaced by machines, past the cemetery where Gordon is, up on the hill under the oak. And I slowed down and said good morning to him out loud like I do. And I told him I was finally going to do the thing I should have done a long time ago. The lawyer's office is above what used to be a shoe store on the square. The shoe store's a vape shop now. The lawyer is a man named Mr. Calloway who handled Gordon's estate, a heavy-set fellow about my age with reading glasses he keeps losing on top of his own head. His girl out front, a sweet young thing, brought me coffee in a real mug and told me he'd be right with me. When I sat down across from him, Mr. Calloway took one look at me and folded his hands and said, "Well, you look like a woman who's made up her mind about something." "I have," I said. I told him everything. It came out of me in a flat, even voice that surprised me. No tears, no shaking, just the facts laid down one after another like cards on a table. The casserole. The leftovers with their names on them. The room at the end of the hall. The 4 years of being made into nothing in my own house. He listened without interrupting, and when I got to the part about the deed, he nodded slowly. "And the house is still solely in your name," he said. It wasn't a question. He'd drawn up half those papers himself. "It is. They've never asked. They assume it passed to my daughter somehow, or that I signed it over. I never did. And they've been living there how long? 4 years. No lease. No rent. I've been paying the property taxes and the homeowner's insurance the whole time out of my own account. They think the bills come out of thin air." He took his glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "You understand what you're telling me you want to do." "I want them out," I said. "I want it done properly and legally so nobody can come back at me. I want a notice to vacate, the longest one the law makes me give, so nobody can say I threw my own family into the street. But I want it official. I want it on letterhead. I want it to come from you, not from me, because if it comes from me, they'll talk me out of it, and I am tired, Mr. Calloway. I am so tired of being talked out of my own life." He was quiet a moment. Then he said gently, the way a doctor says a hard thing, "You're sure? Once we send this, it changes things. It doesn't unsend." And I thought about the green beans sliding into the garbage. I thought about my granddaughter saying old people food without even looking up. I thought about all the Sunday suppers nobody ate. "They threw my dinner in the trash and they laughed," I said. "I'm sure." He started writing. "I'll tell you the truth, and this is the part I've turned over 1,000 times since. There was a moment, sitting in that office while he typed, when a cold thought slid into me and made me sit up straight. The thought was, am I becoming them? Was I about to do to my own daughter the very thing that had been done to me, just wearing a nicer dress while I did it? Was the woman who'd shut her own mother out of her supper any worse than the woman about to shut her daughter out of a house? I sat with that. I made myself sit with it because I didn't want to do an ugly thing and call it justice. But the more I turned it over, the clearer it got. There's a difference, and it's the whole difference in the world. I wasn't asking them to vanish. I wasn't taking the food out of anybody's mouth. I was a woman taking back what was hers and asking the people who disrespected her to stand on their own 2 feet for once. They had jobs now, both of them. They had savings they bragged about at Thanksgiving. They could rent a fine place across town. I wasn't sentencing them to anything but consequences. And consequences, I'd come to understand, are not cruelty. Cruelty is what I'd been swallowing for 4 years. So I let him finish. While the notice was being typed up clean, I walked 2 blocks over to the bank. Same bank Gordon and I used for 40 years. I closed the joint checking account I'd opened with my daughter back when I first got sick that one winter and thought I might need her help paying things. The account she'd been quietly using for her own gas and groceries, dipping in a little here and there. Thinking I wasn't sharp enough to notice the statements. I am very sharp about money. 40 years of keeping the books for Gordon's cabinet shop will do that to a woman. I opened a new account in my name alone. I moved my Social Security and my pension and the small annuity Gordon left into it. I had the bank cancel the card my son-in-law had somehow ended up an authorized user on, the one he'd used to fill up his truck more times than I could count. Then I walked back and signed the notice. Mr. Back, Calloway said he'd have it sent certified, return receipt, so there'd be a record that it was received. He said the law gave them 30 days from the date they signed for it. 30 days. A whole month to find their feet. More mercy than they'd shown me in 4 years. I drove home the long way, past the cemetery again. The light was going gold over the hill. I rolled the window down and let the warm air in, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like a person instead of a problem. Not happy, exactly. I want to be careful not to make it prettier than it was. There's no happy in having to do that to your own child, but I felt clean. I felt like myself. I felt like Gordon's wife again, the woman he'd married, the one who balanced the books and stood her ground and didn't take guff from the lumber suppliers who tried to shortchange a married couple just starting out. The certified letter came 11 days later. I know because I was the one who answered the door for the mailman, and I watched my son-in-law come down to sign for it, and I watched his face while he opened it, standing right there in the front hall. I'll remember that face the rest of my days, not because I enjoyed it, because it told me everything about how little they'd ever really seen me. He read it twice. I watched his lips move. Then he looked up at me, and there was a thing in his eyes I'd never once seen pointed in my direction. Fear. And he said, "What is this? Is this a joke?" "No," I said. "It's not a joke." My daughter came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands, asking what was going on, and he handed it to her, and she read it, and her face went white, and then red, and then white again. "This says we have to be out in 30 days, she said. "This says the house is—" "Mom, this is wrong. This is a mistake. The house is ours. It came to us when Daddy—" "No," I said again, and I was surprised how steady my voice came out. "It didn't. Your father left the house to me. It has always been mine. I let you live in it. I was glad to, once. But you stopped seeing it as mine a long time ago, and you stopped seeing me along with it." She started to cry, and a younger me, a me from even a year ago, would have folded right there. Would have said, "Never mind, forget it. I didn't mean it. You can stay forever." But I'd done all my folding. There wasn't any left in me. "You threw my supper in the garbage," I said quietly. "You and your husband. And your children left. In my house, the house I paid for, the house I've kept the lights on in, the house I paid the taxes on every single year while you put your names on the leftovers. I have 30 years of marriage cooked into a casserole dish that's in a landfill right now because the two of you couldn't be bothered to wait 20 minutes to eat what I made. So no, I'm not changing my mind." The fight went out of her, and what was left underneath was uglier and more honest. "Where are we supposed to go?" she said. "We can't afford." "You can," I said. "You both make good money. You talk about it enough at the holidays. You've got savings you've never offered me a dime of. Not for the taxes, not for the insurance, not so much as a tank of gas in return for the roof I've kept over your heads. You'll find a place. You've got 30 days and a mother who isn't dead yet to help you look, if you ask me nice. That offer expires the first time one of you raises your voice to me in this house again." Nobody raised their voice. That's the strange part. After all that quiet cruelty, when I finally stood up straight, they got very, very quiet themselves. The 30 days were the longest and the shortest of my life. I won't pretend they were easy. My daughter didn't speak to me for the first week, except to slam cabinets and let me know she was wounded. My son-in-law wouldn't look at me at all. The kids, I think, only half understood. My grandson at least had the grace to look embarrassed when we passed in the hall, and once, just once, my granddaughter said, "Sorry about your green beans, Grandma," and I about fell over. Because it was the first apology I'd had from any of them in 4 years, and it was from the one I'd least expected. I didn't gloat. I want that understood. I didn't say a single sharp word that whole month that I didn't have to. I cooked for myself in my own kitchen, real meals now, a small roast on Sundays, and I ate at the table like a human being and not a mouse in the wall. When my daughter finally broke down one night and asked in a small voice if I'd come look at apartments with her, I put my coat on and got in the car. We drove around the whole town. I helped her find a nice 3-bedroom over by the elementary school, close enough to the kids' friends, with a yard for a dog if they ever got one. I co-signed nothing. I'd learned my lesson about that. But I sat with her in the rental office and I told the landlord she was a good tenant, and that part wasn't even a lie. She'd just been a bad daughter for a while. People can be both. On the 29th day, she found me in the kitchen and she stood in the doorway a long time before she said anything. Then she said, "I don't know when I stopped seeing you." I didn't say anything. Some things you have to let a person sit in. "I think it was after Daddy," she said. "It was like you got quiet and I got busy, and somewhere in there you just became part of the house, and I'm so ashamed, Mom. I'm so ashamed I can't even look at you." And she cried, and this time I let her. And after a minute, I crossed the kitchen and I held my daughter the way I held her when she was 6 and fell off her bike, and she held me back. And we stood there in the middle of the room I'd nearly given up on, and it wasn't fixed. Nothing was fixed. But it was a beginning of something honest instead of an ending of something rotten. They moved out on the 30th day. I watched from the porch, the one Gordon built, with a cup of coffee going cold in my hands. My son-in-law carried boxes and didn't say goodbye. The kids did, both of them. My grandson with a quick, awkward hug, and my granddaughter with a real one, a long one and a whispered, "I'm gonna call you, Grandma," that I have decided to believe. My daughter was last. She stood at the bottom of the porch steps and she looked up at me, and there was so much in her face I couldn't begin to name it. "Sunday supper," she finally said. "If you'll have us, just you, I'll bring nothing and you make the green beans." "I'll have you," I said, and I meant it. When the last car pulled away from the curb, the house went still around me, and I want to tell you it was a sad still, a lonely still, but it wasn't. It was the still of a held breath, finally let go. I walked through every room slow, the way you walk through a place you're meeting again after a long time apart. I touched the banister Gordon sanded by hand. I straightened the picture frames. In the living room, I found the soda can somebody'd left on the windowsill, sweating a ring into the wood, and I picked it up and carried it to the kitchen and dropped it in the trash. And the little clatter it made was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in years. Then I went upstairs and I moved my things, my photographs, my church bulletins, my spare glasses, Gordon's picture from the Olive Garden, out of the little sewing room at the end of the hall and back into the big bedroom where they belonged. I made the bed up fresh with the good quilt, the one my mother sewed. I opened the windows wide and let 4 years of other people's air go rushing out, and the lilac Gordon planted under the window came drifting in, sweet and green and alive. That evening I cooked a proper supper. Not to prove anything to anybody, just for me. A small chicken roasted the way Gordon liked it, with rosemary from the pot on the sill and potatoes and, yes, the green beans, the very same recipe, made fresh. I set one place at the table. I lit a candle, the good one I'd been saving for nothing in particular. And I ate slow, and I tasted every bite, and partway through I started laughing, and then I started crying, and then I did both at once, the way you do when something heavy finally lifts off you and you don't know what to do with your hands. I'm 68 years old. I was married to a good man for 41 years, and I have been a widow for 5. I gave my whole life to my family, every Sunday supper, every scraped knee, every dollar I ever earned keeping the books. And for a while, there I let them teach me that all of that made me worth nothing, that I was old people food. something you tip into the garbage without setting the dish down first. But here is what I know now. Sitting in my own house at my own table with my husband's lilacs in the window. Respect isn't something they hand you. Not your children, not anyone. You don't earn it by getting smaller. You claim it. You stand up straight in your good blouse with your hair pinned, and you put your name on the deed where it has always been, and you let the people who couldn't see you go find out what it costs to live without you. They didn't lose a house. Houses are easy to come by. My daughter's got a nice one across town now. What they lost was me. My hands, my Sunday suppers, my patience, the soft, endless yes I'd been giving them for free. And the strange grace of it is, losing that is the thing that finally made them want it back. I blew out the candle when supper was done. I washed my one dish and set it in the rack. And I stood at the open window a long while, listening to the quiet street and smelling the lilacs, before I went up to my own bed in my own room, in my own house, and slept the whole night through.